once above 50 degrees to make bananas, but it freezes to the ground every year and then grows back up 30 feet tall. It's just astonishing. The wind in the banana leaves sounds so tropical. It's really cool. And it blew out my stone. I have a dry stack stone wall in front of it, and it blew that out last year because it spreads. It's sort of invasive. So I had to chop out a bunch of it and then rebuild the wall.
Looks like Hunter is in. I'm seeing audio coming through the stream on the closed caption, but I'm not seeing any of the visual elements that come in. We're going to try some more work around real quick.
Okay. Where's well, I thought she said we were streaming.
Meanwhile, since I'm talking, sorry. I was going to say, meanwhile, since I'm talking about gardening, I like heirloom tomatoes like the Cherokee Purple, and they're very prone to blight. And blight is generally spread by rain splashing into the dirt and splashing up on the plants. And so.
Okay, y'all, we're live.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everyone.
For those of us following on YouTube, we may be under the wrong title and not on the UFC page, but under the that Asheville, the AHAC page. So, which is
the affordable housing.
So for those of us, the affordable housing page. So for those of us who are looking for the live stream online.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the August 2023 City of Asheville Urban Forestry Commission meeting. I'll be your host for this afternoon, Patrick Gilbert, and I apologize for the technical difficulty that caused the delay in the start. Before we get to the agenda, we'll go through introductions, and I'll start with the Urban Forestry Commission members. Karen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen McNeil, and I'm on the UFC.
Sharon.
Hi, everybody. Sharon Summerall on UFC and Technical Review Committee appointee.
Chardin,
Hello, Chardon, UFC.
Ed,
Ed Macy, Asheville Greenworks, USC.
Cecil,
Cecil Bothwell, 8-year liaison from City Council to the Tree Commission and UFC since then.
Zoe.
Zoe Hoyle, UFC.
Zoe is the vice chair, and I'm Patrick Gilbert. I am the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission meeting. City staff, Jackson,
Hello, hi. My name is Jackson Marks. I am a planning technician that will be sitting in on these meetings going forward.
Hunter. Is he on there?
He may have to remain muted just because he doesn't want back overlay of audio.
Okay. So for the commission members' explanation, Hunter is transitioning off as our direct staff report for the Urban Forestry Commission, and Jackson Marks is transitioning on. So welcome, Jackson. Nancy.
I'm Nancy Watford, zoning and stormwater supervisor, development or planning and urban design department.
Keith.
Keith Aiken, urban forester, planning and urban development.
Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sam Starbaum, Planner 2 with the new Planning and Urban Design Department. Kind of hard for all of us to say with the new department. I think one of us got it right. Together.
Jennifer.
I am Jennifer Blevins, Planner 1 with the City of Asheville Planning and Urban Design Department.
Mark.
Mark Foster, city arborist, public works department.
Dustin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dustin Clemens, City of Asheville's Capital Projects Department.
Is Chris Collins with us?
Not today.
Not today. And what about Stephanie Munson-Dull? No. Okay. I see Sarah Miller.
Hi, Sarah Miller, Asheville Greenworks Community Forestry Coordinator.
Okay. And there's a Josh Russell.
Yeah, this is Josh Russell with Paulson Mitchell. We are the civil engineers for the site.
For the alternative compliance case. Okay. Is there anybody else from the applicant for the ulterior compliance at the meeting?
Yeah, I think we have a few. We have Sidney Howman. He is our landscape architect here in our office. So he's on the call. And then I believe the clients, Alex Perry and Marty Murphy are on as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else that I might have missed? Okay. If not, we'll move into the agenda. I hope everyone had a chance to read the minutes for the July 2023 Urban Forestry Commission meeting that was held on June 27th. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Okay, Cecil moves. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. And I will go down the list. Zoe?
Aye.
Cecil?
Aye.
Ed Macy?
I'll abstain. I was absent last month.
Okay. Chardon?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Excuse me. So the minutes of the July meeting have been approved. We'll now go into alternative compliance. And this is a request for the project at 3 Regent Park Boulevard. So Jennifer?
Yes, hello again, Jennifer Blevins. This is a fairly straightforward request, similar to many you have seen over the years. The project is to develop a vacant parcel at the corner of Regent Park Boulevard and Patton Avenue. And as such, the UDO requires that the site be brought into compliance with all of the standards in Article 11. The Level 1 site plan is currently under review, and it does appear that they'll be able to meet all of the landscaping standards with the exception of the street tree placement along Patton Avenue. The UDO requires the trees to be placed within 20 feet of the street edge. And so the applicant applied to NCDOT for an encroachment agreement to allow them to place the trees there along Patton Avenue, but that was denied. So as a result, they are seeking a recommendation to allow the trees to be placed within their property boundaries, which, due to the width of the DOT right-of-way along that portion, is going to be about 60 to 80 feet from the edge of the street. There is one thing I would note that I would seek direction or recommendation from you. If they were going to be placing the trees as the code requires right along Patton Avenue, there are overhead utilities present, and that would require 7 small maturing trees. If they place the trees within their property boundaries, there are no overhead utilities along that portion of their property. So that would change the requirement to 1 tree for every 40 feet, which is 5 large maturing trees. So, they could do either one of those standards, or they could do a mix along that portion. Just seeking a recommendation from you on whether you would be wanting to see 7 small trees, as would be necessary along the street, or 5 large maturing trees, because they would now be within their property boundaries. And I'm happy to entertain any questions. I see Sharon has one now.
Hey, Jennifer, can we see the plans again? When I looked at the plans where they showed what trees were going, yeah.
There you go.
So, one, I couldn't read the green, so I didn't know, and they just have VUA planting, but they didn't call off what species was going where. So, and they've got elms and I forget, my notes are somewhere.
Right. What we're looking at is the green. It's the street trees down along the south portion of the site.
What species do they have for that now?
I don't have that plan in front of me, but we do have the landscape architect here with us. If y'all would like to jump in and advise what species you are suggesting or proposing for those trees.
Sure, this is Sid Howman. So along Regent, we are proposing the bald cypress. Originally, we had proposed the swamp cypress.
Right. I remember that comment. The ones there along Patton Avenue are the ones we're concerned about with this application. Okay. What were those going to be?
So it was hawthorns for the small trees.
Okay.
Those are the green ones, and the larger ones are Quercus lyrata, the red ones on the right.
Mm-hmm.
Where were the elms? You have 12 elms, I believe. I looked at this several days ago,
So the elms are the blue trees, and they're throughout the site on the east side of the site and within the middle of the site.
Right. Those I'm sure were claimed for the parking lot landscaping
Correct.
requirement rather than street tree requirement. Correct. Okay.
Okay, so I got a couple questions. One, you didn't put down a disease-resistant elm. You just used the American elm, and I'm assuming you're going to use one of the varieties that are disease-resistant because you've got 12 of those. So it'd be good if you put the species down there, so when the contractor comes in, that at least we know we've got some of the Dutch elm disease-resistant. And again, it's a bald cypress we're looking at changing, Jennifer?
Well, we've already that's been part of our level 1 review. They were proposing a swamp cypress, and they have changed to the bald cypress, but those are along Regent Park. We're talking about the street trees there on the south side, between Patton Avenue and the south side of the property.
And those are the hawthorns.
Correct.
And are they, according to this plan, planted where they want to be or where they were originally and they want to move them? Are they showing now where they're going to sit?
Yes. Where they would be required to be is within 20 feet of the travel lane of Patton Avenue. Go back to that one that you made, Jackson, with the red marking there that shows the right of way. So all of that red is public right of way. And that yellow line is 20 feet from the edge of Patton Avenue. That's where the trees are required for the UDO, but DOT will not give them an encroachment agreement. So they're having to move them way back up onto their property, 60 to 80 feet from the travel lane of Patton Avenue. So that's why you see those green ones so far away from the road. That's what this request is about today. Mr. Macy.
Yes, thank you. This does seem pretty straightforward. My preference is that we do large 5 maturing trees rather than the small maturing trees. I can't speak for the rest of the group, but experience is that smaller maturing trees have a much harder time getting established and don't really provide as much canopy compared to the large.
Thank you for that.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
It's not clear to me from the plan which are the 5 large maturing trees.
Right.
The 2 red circles and
3
red circles? Oh,
my understanding is that they'll substitute the green circles with large maturing trees, which would become a different color circle.
Oh, okay.
Right. They showed, because the code required small maturing, that's what they're showing, but it required it because they would be along Patton Avenue where the overhead utilities are present. But now that we'll be moving them back onto the property, there's no overhead utilities there, so they would be able to plant large maturing trees. And the code per that length of frontage would require 5 large maturing trees. So we'll work that through when we continue on with the level 1 site plan review.
Yes.
Thank you, Jennifer, for explaining that, because
sure.
I still didn't get it, but I agree with Ed. You know, there looks like there's plenty of room. I can't tell how many feet between. I don't think there's a building there. It looks like walkway maybe, but it looks like there's plenty of clearance for a large maturing tree in the building. And
right, that's part of the parking lot. That is part of the drive through and drive up to the entrance to the car wash.
Oh yeah,
or the exit from the car wash. And I think they've come so far away from the west corner there because they have that very large oak, I believe, very large tree there on the corner. Obviously, they wanted to steer clear of that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Keith?
Yeah, so but I guess to clarify, is that large oak going to come out?
No, it's being preserved.
It's being preserved. I did drive by it yesterday. It does have a pretty big chunk, probably about 3.5 feet up on it. But yeah, I'm glad to see that they're going to attempt to preserve that. Yeah, I think that's great.
I saw that chunk, and if you go back and look over time, it's been there, in the street views and things. I think it's been there for a pretty long time. So fingers crossed.
No, it's it's really a really gorgeous tree. It's obviously had some issues with some trucks and probably a few vehicles hitting it over time. So if anything, it's a good bumper tree.
Right.
But yeah, good work.
Are there any other questions for Jennifer or any of the applicants? Yes, Chardin.
I'd be curious in the preservation of that red oak, is there any plan to take away that, at least one parking space, if not 2 parking spaces, to provide more soil space for it?
Well, there's not going to be any parking spaces there along that side. Basically, they're going to grade the entire lot and to redevelop. I think the building's already been demolished and they're going to redevelop. So there aren't any parking spaces in that vicinity.
But as far as like the asphalt that is close to the tree right now, is there any plan to increase the available soil space for that tree by removing it?
That sort of spotted strip there where you see north of the tree to be preserved, there's a green tree and then some shrubs. That whole strip is going to be sod. Sod and or mulch. I'm not, again, I don't have the actual blow up of the plan in front of me, but that's not pavement. The pavement is the white area that you see.
I sort of understand that. The plans are a little confusing in my eye too. But my only recommendation would be to maximize the soil space for the oak if you're wanting to keep it. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Jackson, do we have anybody on the line for public comment on this alternative compliance request for 3 Regent Park Boulevard?
There is currently no one waiting in the queue to comment at this moment.
Okay, then we'll move on to discussion. Does any member have anything else to say about the request in terms of its clarity? If not, then yes, go ahead, Ed.
Motion to approve this alternative compliance request.
Okay, is there a recommendation with the motion to recommend planting of the larger maturing trees as opposed to the smaller trees?
Yeah, I can amend my motion to say that, although I don't know if we can tender recommendations along with these requests, but the city's already heard our recommendation on that.
We can recommend. I don't think we can base approval and disapproval solely based on that, but we can include the recommendation in the motion.
Okay, I'll revise my motion to approve with the recommendation to substitute small maturing trees for 5 large maturing trees.
I second it.
All right, it's been moved and second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes, Cecil. Cecil, you're on mute.
Well, there you go. I think we all know what you meant, but the way you framed it, you said substitute 5 small maturing trees for 5 large ones. And I think what we all understood you to mean is to substitute 5 large maturing trees for 7 small ones.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I misled. My motion was to approve with the recommendation to substitute the small maturing trees with 5 large maturing trees.
Okay, the width works there, but I mean, I would say that the easier language would be to substitute 5 large maturing trees for the 7 small maturing trees. That was my quibble.
All right, so we'll make that the motion with that change. Does the seconder accept the change?
Yes.
Okay. So if there is no further discussion on the motion, I will call the roll. Karen?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Chardin?
Aye.
Cecil?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Zoe?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So the alternative compliance for 3 Regent Park Boulevard is approved. So thank you, Jennifer, and applicants for being at the meeting and answering our questions and explaining the project.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Okay, so we'll move on now to public comment. Jackson, do we have any callers on the line?
I don't see anyone on the line at the moment, no. Maybe an issue with how they're starting late, but there's no one on the line at the moment.
Is there an issue with the fact that it comes across as the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee as opposed to the Urban Forestry Commission? Anybody? Because I know there were going to be some callers at the meeting.
IT says they're working on getting the streams coordinated. It may just be a moment. They just got back to us on fixing some things. Just a moment.
While we're waiting, I see that Kim Roney has joined the meeting. Kim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Kim Roney, City Council member and liaison to the Urban Forestry Commission. I wanted to suggest that you might hear the staff reports and move public comment to after that and before old business while we work on logistics.
Is that acceptable? I'm fine with that as long as it's acceptable. Yes.
Is that yes for me?
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. Do we treat our emails as public comment?
You mean the ones received via
the ones that we got that we were to read that were to us at UFC?
From public input? Yes.
And so that would come under the discussion under public comment then?
Right.
Because we got 2 emails, right? I read 2 emails.
Right, the emails are part of the record of public comment. We don't necessarily read them in the public comment section.
Do we discuss them in the public comment section?
Once the public comment section is, yes, once we have speakers, if we do, and the speakers speak, we can address.
Was that on your agenda item to do so, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to jump the gun, but I just didn't know. We've never I think we've discussed in the few years I've been on here, emails maybe twice in 6 years. So I wasn't sure what our protocol was for that.
Right. Nancy, can we move on with the agenda, and once they straighten out the public comment access, come back to that?
Yes. We can.
That doesn't take a motion and approval by the commission?
No, this is a technical glitch.
Technical glitch. Okay. So if we move on to staff reports, we have Dustin Clemens, who was going to talk about the Hall Creek sidewalk update, but he is on here because there were going to be some people in the public comment portion that wanted to address that. So I'm going to move on, and we'll come back to that if we get the public comment technical glitch ironed out. If not, then we'll come back to Dustin. Yes. So we'll go to City Arborist, Mark.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going well.
It's been pretty typical summer, you know, hot, having to do a little bit of supplementary watering for some of my baby trees to help them along. And we had a fair number of trees come down during windstorms. Monday, we had 11 sites we responded to, getting trees out of the road and so forth from the wind on Saturday. Back on the 17th, we had 5 sites we responded to. And other than that, it's just pretty much normal stuff. You know, pruning trees, removing dead trees, doing roadside vegetation pruning so you all can use your roads. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mark. The urban forester update, Keith?
Yeah, so I guess I wish it was business as usual, but you know, certainly had a busy last 30 days, and you know, dealing with some trying to close out some steep slope tree removal permits. We've also had a few complaints up in the steep slopes for some people that were supposedly cutting down trees that turned out to be nothing really, just more of a neighbor dispute. Also been working on soil volumes with Vidilla and Dustin, and we had a big meeting I think a couple weeks ago, and talked about some potential new systems and some changes to the way we handle street trees. And let's see, tree removal. Also been you know, trying to get educated on the TRC process, so that I can take over that, you know, come December. Sat in a couple accelerator, I guess, accelerator programs that are run through the Center for Regenerative Solutions. It's based out of the city of Boulder, and it's essentially an accelerator for cities and towns that are being affected by climate change, and how they're dealing with different problems and that sort of thing. Always studying for the arborist exam, and let's see, went through a new member orientation for the boards and commissions, since I had not done anything like that. I actually learned quite a bit in that. Met with Ed last week for a little bit, and just kind of catching him up, and then as far as myself and I have a few upcoming I guess public appearances, I guess I could call them. So I'm going to be doing the What's Up Asheville radio show. Still have yet to make a date for that. And then I'm doing an interview for Mountain X either on or around August 11th of this month. But that's really about it. Any questions?
Hey, Keith.
Yeah, Sharon.
Your audio was kind of breaking up, so all I heard was changes to handle, but I didn't hear what changes you said you were working on to handle.
You mean the changes in the soil volumes? Is that what?
You said you met with the soil volume, and then after that you said something changes to handle, and I didn't know whether it was a zoning changes. The word kind of broke up and I didn't hear it, so maybe you were just being general.
Yeah, I think I was just probably most likely being general. Yeah, I can't think of, I don't have anything where it has changes on here.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Keith? If not, thank you, Keith, for your report. Yep. Planning Department reorganization, Nancy Watford.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. The planning department and the zoning group in DSD has now become one department. The planning and urban design department, so those of us in the DSD, have moved into planning and urban design. So that's exciting news. So with some of this reorganization, we have some staff changes with our planning techs and support with groups, and Keith, the urban forester, is moving to the long range planning department side of that group to focus on the big picture in our urban forestry master plan, and as the program grows. So as well as we have the planning techs, as you know, Hunter came on board as Haley and Tyler moved up in their positions, and so Jackson and so Hunter's come on board, and then so he's been doing 2 jobs for a while, and so we had Jackson Marks, who has come on board with us now. He's been here about 3 weeks, maybe a month. Joined the department in the city of Asheville, and I'll let him introduce himself, but he's going to be the staff liaison and admin support for Urban Forestry Commission moving forward.
Hello, good afternoon. Oh,
go ahead, Jackson.
Yep. Quick update. Everything seems to be working now. Logan's come in and helped out with some stuff. So the phone queue is back up again. It looks like there was an error with the YouTube links with how the stream wasn't working. And the stream has been going for the last 30 plus minutes as well, with image and audio. So everything back on track. Yeah, I joined the city on the 10th, and I'm in the middle of, I'm starting my 4th week with the city. really excited to be here. And yeah, appreciate everyone. Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Jackson. Nancy, will you continue to be part of the liaison staff, or is someone replacing you in that capacity?
So Keith will be replacing me in that capacity.
Okay.
The urban forester. As well as, I think Stephanie Munson's going to be the new Chris type, so the management level leadership for the group. But we're slowly going to transition that. You'll see me in the background here helping support this group as it moves forward until we get the transition fully made. So
We'll miss you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. Does anyone have any questions for Nancy? If not, thanks again, Nancy, for your report, and we'll move on to the tree canopy preservation ordinance report. Are there any questions from any commission members on the report? Yes.
Will Nancy continue to be doing this report, or will Keith be doing it?
It's my understanding I'll be taking over everything, or all of Nancy's roles.
All of Nancy's. Okay, I got a question also. I noticed that the canopy planted last month is the same as this month. Is that just a coincidence?
We did not get it
Go ahead.
updated.
I didn't catch that.
I did not get that updated this month.
Okay, that's fine. I just been looking at it because I noticed that we don't have any canopy preserved. And I thought, I've seen enough TRC that I know that there's been some canopy preserved.
That, and I will say, Sharon, I do take these measures off issued permits. So you can see something go through TRC and then it sit there for a while.
Yeah, that I know, but I do know there's a couple that have gone through, but I would just didn't know where they are in their final. So I know you get it at the very end. So I'm just wanting to see that go up. So thank you. So Keith, I'll be bugging Keith for a while on that then. Thanks.
Yep, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Sharon. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Can we just reiterate for anyone listening where to find the data for canopy preserved in this information?
Nancy or Keith, can you respond to Karen's question?
Sorry, I didn't get the beginning of that question. Where do you find this information?
Yeah, can we just clarify for the public and anyone listening where to find this information?
So we present it in this report monthly to you all and the public, because otherwise you have it's on the submittal plans that come in for review and documentation, but it's not readily available information from our permit system to the public. So that's why I have to go get it, pull it out, and present it to you. So it's on the plans because that's where it's pulled from, but you have to look at each individual project that gets approved.
So I think that the public has access to the commission meeting documents where these tree canopy preservation ordinance update is. So they can go to that link and get the latest information on the canopy preservation ordinance and all that information. Any other questions? Jackson, do we have anybody on the line for public comment?
Not at this moment, no.
Okay. So let's go back to that section for just a second. I believe, or I hope all of you read some of the emails that were submitted for the public comment section. One of them, I know maybe both, had to do with the issue at the municipal golf course. And that was submitted by a person by the name of Gloria Shen. I reached out to Chris Coral, who was present at our July meeting, and gave us an update on the situation at the municipal golf course project. I shared those emails with him and asked if he wanted to be at the meeting to respond. He is actually out of town this week attending a training conference, so he couldn't make the meeting. The essence of the emails centered on the request that the enforcement mechanism for the tree planting, pruning standards be evaluated and updated, along with potentially the fines for violating those standards. We touched on that at the last meeting, and the commission voted to create an enforcement working group. And I believe that Karen Chardin and Cecil volunteered to be members of that working group. So before I sort of throw it open to the commission on that point, I did speak to Chris Coral about the enforcement issue at the municipal golf course. He did acknowledge that there were some issues related to the tree pruning standards not being followed. He did take those issues to the city legal department and ask for their advice on whether or not there should be citations issued and fines if the citation was not responded to. The legal department, for reasons that I'm not privy to, demurred in terms of issuing citations and going after fines, but instead recommended that Chris enter into discussions with the subcontractor about reimbursing the city as a result of the damages caused by the tree pruning there on the municipal golf course. The subcontractor ultimately agreed to reimburse the city from their contract award $2,500 that will go to some sort of remedial project for the trees. And that is in lieu of citations or fines. So that is the one update on the enforcement at the municipal golf course. So I'll throw it open to the commission members if they want to discuss the emails on this specific project. Yes.
I think one of the points that I left last meeting with, and Gloria did a good job of pointing out, is remediation needs to happen on more than just 6 trees. Or I remember the last meeting there were 8, but there were obviously many other trees affected. The remediation cost of $2,500 is very small. You know, that's not going to cover maybe 2 trees. You know, so I think the repercussions is very low compared to what that project probably made them, and it needs to be applied to all trees affected, not just 6 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
Karen?
Yes, I completely agree. And I think another point that was made in Gloria's email was that there is a desire from the community for more transparency regarding how these numbers are evaluated, and that it should really be quantified and shared in a way that is more readily available, so that a precedent can be set for the future. So if this happens again, it can be known that there is a process. It's a very clear process. It's a documented process. It's not like a backroom process, and it's just a much more transparent process for the community and for potential violators, so that they can know what to expect.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else?
Yeah, I totally agree with Karen and Chardon. The problem is that the correct person to monitor this was a person with no experience. And as a contractor, I'm bringing in someone that has got heavy experience to monitor a job. And for the powers that be to think that Chris, who did probably the best job he could without the experience, it was a lot to ask for Chris to do. And in my world, if you're going to have someone dealing with trees or whatever your specialty is, then you bring that someone in to monitor it and oversee it, that has that experience. And so somehow in our breakdown in the city, we don't seem to want to bring in people that have the most professional expertise to monitor a situation like that. And that's why I see the breakdown. And as far as the fine goes, that's arbitrary. That is who set that up. It doesn't cover nearly the damage that was done there. And she makes some very good points in this long email that, you know, that need to be addressed. But I don't know if it's within our purview to do so. You know,
Okay.
that's my 2 cents on it.
Chardon?
Yeah, Sharon, along the same lines of, you know, hiring contractors who care and having the oversight to manage them. You know, I drove by the golf course about 10 days ago along Fairway Drive, and there was a lot of impact happening on white oaks that had been severely pruned. I'm not quite sure. I didn't have the time to stop and really suss it out, but, you know, they were regrading up to the base of several large white oaks, and there's just no regard given to these trees. And so I would also lobby for like continued presence and continued care for the trees that are on that golf course if we're going to be responsible for them. You know, right now there's nothing happening to protect the soil zones of those trees.
Cecil?
I'd like to apologize. After our last meeting, I contacted both Karen and Chardon and suggested we independently look into things and then combine our efforts in a couple of weeks, and I dropped the ball on that. I'll try to follow up more on this. That's why we don't really have a committee report right now. Obviously, people have been paying attention, though. I'm glad of that, and I just got really busy, and I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Yes, Karen. Karen, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'd just like to revisit the question of whether or not this is within our purview. It's my understanding that when there is a violation, the violator is given notice, and it's $100 a day per violation, and then there's a committee that can review the violation. And so what can we do with this, you know, as the Urban Forestry Commission, to promote more transparency in this process?
So as far as reviewing violations, I'm not sure that falls within the commission's purview. However, I will ask Keith or Nancy to weigh in on that if they choose.
So, no, it's not really in the commission's purview. And there's also two different ways that, like, enforcement on a city project and a city contract is different than what development services does in terms of zoning enforcement. So the code enforcement handles any private property violation, and that may be the section of code that y'all are looking at. But anyway, they're handled differently. But recommendations can be made around those. I mean, that's what this group does. So for those improvements, and if there are sometimes, because you have seen cases that have come in for alternative landscaping plans, like the whole plan, because they've gone out and done mass tree removal where it's not been permitted. And so they've had to come in and do a remediation plan. And so y'all do see those as part of that process for remediation and of a violation for some of those projects. So
yeah, Keith.
Yeah, I was going to say that you know, and I'm not trying to pass the buck or anything, but you know, this is kind of Mark's you know, bread and butter here on public land. So yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen this handled differently, and I think, you know, in the future, I believe it will, considering how much you know, negative feedback we've got from it. So, but yeah, I just want to make that distinction of, you know, what I can and cannot do. You know, certainly can make recommendations, but as far as, you know, going out there and you know, watching people, you know, prune trees and that sort of thing, I think I've got enough on my plate already, especially with the plan. And, you know, and as, you know, we get the plan going and you know, when we eventually finish it, I hope to have a little bit more time to, you know, maybe spend on, you know, some public projects. But, you know, right now it's really, that's really up to Mark.
Kim?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about like some other avenues for ways that I've seen advisory boards to be able to get information that they need so that they can make a recommendation that's in the scope of work. So, for example, if there's an issue with a sidewalk that has an issue, or maybe a bike lane that has a lot of material in it, for example, I could instruct folks to move this up the ladder of communications by doing things like taking pictures with the Asheville app or emailing staff so that there's, sort of the public comments that we've already been getting in this case. And I do wonder, what would it look like if the Urban Forestry Commission asked for an update on what happens when the city violates their own policy? How many violations would it have been if it was by comparison to private property? So we can get like a picture that would inform a recommendation. And what are the ways that we can share responsibility with the community and share successes, but also accountability for if folks can use those like pictures and engagements and comments to participate in collecting data to help inform not just this situation, but future decisions. So those are the kinds of questions that I would be curious to know if the Urban Forestry Commission needs more information, needs support, needs tools, so that either the staff or I as your council liaison can make sure that we don't get a clog of communications, because I think that would be a disservice to everyone involved. But it also is an opportunity to learn some lessons on what we do in this situation and other similar ones.
Thank you, Kim. Those are good suggestions. Cecil?
This is a suggestion for Kim, I guess, and for the council. Something I tried to advance 6 or 7 years ago on council is, why don't we fine contractors who violate our tree ordinances? I mean, in most cases, like my neighbor was a big deal here some years ago who caused a landslide and all, because he had a contractor come in and clear cut a steep slope. And then it washed out and it washed into the road, and the city had to clean the road, and the city enforcement was to go talk to him. And he came and talked to us at the Urban Forestry Commission and said that he was going to plant some trees, and he's planted a few trees. But the contractor who did that, just as the contractor who violates the rules on the golf course, I mean, the contractor in either case is a private operator. Why don't they get fined? I mean, if we find a contractor $5,000 for conducting a clear cut for a private individual, it would slow down the contractors. Or if we find them $20,000, I mean, I don't know what the level would be, but why not hold these contractors accountable for violation of our laws? And again, in my neighbor's case, the contractor did the work that he hired, and there was no consequence to anyone at all, except that he said he'd plant some trees, and he's planted a few trees.
That brings up another package of questions that the Urban Forestry could make, like a list of the kinds of community benefits that trees provide. When you're looking at like what a tree inventory is, what is the value of stormwater mitigation, air quality, et cetera, for a tree of what size? There may be that there's some stormwater mitigation happening from invasive species, but like what are the long-term other impacts? Those are the kinds of curiosities and questions and processes that I would definitely love to support the Urban Forestry Commission making as a whole. What I think we'll bump into is that this is city maintained property, right? So I think you might have to ask a different kind of set of questions around, by comparison, if this was private property, what would the cost be? And how could that cost be mitigated?
Okay, good thoughts.
Karen?
Which brings me to stopping the bleed. We've got people, as Chardon, I drive by there all the time. I'm watching them grading and doing all kinds of things out there. So there's destruction going on as we speak. So we've got city properties, so we must have some kind of zoning enforcement on city property, whether it goes up the food chain from Mark to having someone, I'm just going to throw out Greg because I know Greg is above Mark. I don't know if that's the order of things. And Greg goes out there and he walks the property with Chris and can see the violation with the grading that's going on or the continued pruning, so that we can put a stop to what's going on right now. And then we can think of the long-term plan. But the issue with me is working within zoning all the time is on the food chain who goes out there and walks it and says, you know, you guys have got to stop this in this area because it's impacting these trees. And we all know that we've got the critical root zone, and they can, like in my world, I tape off with caution tape or whatever and say, you can't go beyond this. So, and I granted the course is large, but they're taking the course and they're working it off in sections. So it's not like there's a bunch of people out there running amok. They really do have an order, but we need to have oversight right now so more damage is not incurred right now. And because it's city property, I'm thinking someone above Mark can go out and walk the course and stop what's going on right at the moment.
Before we move on, Mark, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I was just trying to look through chapter 20 to see what the process is that is appropriate at this point in things, since this is no longer a, as far as the pruning of the oaks is concerned, this is no longer a new situation, and staff have tried to work toward some sort of remediation or solution or whatever. And obviously it's not viewed as adequate, but it's too late in the process to follow the steps as it's outlined in chapter 20. But I certainly don't mind to take a look and see what new stuff is going on. I know that more drainage work had to be done so that the marshy parts of the course could be corrected. I don't know, I have not seen the plans that relate to the stormwater stuff. So I'll need to see those and get with the golf course folks and see where the plans and the physical ground compare and what plans are still yet to be implemented or whatever. But as far as the pruning on the oak trees, I was definitely not real pleased to see how that had turned out, as we had the expectation that the contractor had a certified arborist who was supposed to be babysitting them during the extent of the process. But that ship has also sailed already. I mean, doing root work around the trees to try and make their lives better in terms of decompaction and maybe changing the nutrients levels in the soil, that can be helpful, but we can't undo the pruning that happened. And so if fining was to be proposed for the pruning, fining usually goes on for each day that a violation is in effect. Well, you can't undo the pruning. So you can't realistically fine for every day that the trees are, have those pruning wounds. The wounds aren't going away and you can't undo it, So I think probably legal counsel to myself and Greg would probably be beneficial because us just trying to figure out what is the city prepared to do, that's something probably beyond just myself or Greg.
So to Sharon's question, how does the enforcement mechanism work on city property or public property?
It looks as though a notice is sent to the party who's carrying out the damage. It is sent from, let's see, sent from Greg. So they're told they need to stop doing whatever it is that they're doing, whatever particular violations. And then some sort of solution is supposed to be proposed. And then the folks who are carrying out the violations are supposed to implement that solution and discontinue whatever damaging, behavior they're doing. And then if they were, if you have ongoing violations, it's $100 a day. is what the current penalty is in Chapter 20.
Okay. Chardon?
Mark, with all this department change, my eyes kind of glaze over with that in some regard. Is Parks and Rec still going to be separate from your department?
Yes, I'm in the Public Works Department. Yeah, I'm not in the same department as Parks. And really, Parks and Rec is not the department that has the golf course.
Yeah, I get that. I'm just kind of curious, thinking back to a previous conversation. I wonder, with the idea that the city could be providing the gold standard to how to work around trees, if there's a way to write in to departments that are working around trees, such as municipal golf course or Parks and Rec, that if a tree of a certain size is going to be encroached upon, outside or within diameter times 7, that the city arborist would have eyes on it and would be able to approve or disapprove of whatever they want to do. For the instance of the fairway drive, having an arborist involved in that would have prevented a lot of damage. And so I think about ways that the city can provide an example of how to responsibly work around trees and be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish as far as drainage or whatever else they're trying to do there.
Right. So are you suggesting that when projects come up on city property that I should be on site during the entirety of the day while work is happening around the trees? I probably need
no, I mean, I'm not suggesting that necessarily. I know, New York City has a whole army of urban foresters and they do that.
And we don't.
We don't.
Yeah.
I get that. Maybe we can work towards that. But as far as just looking at the project beforehand and ideally setting up fences that they cannot encroach upon, like that's huge to be able to do that on a 30-inch white oak. It might mean the difference between life and death in 10 years. That's what I'm suggesting, more along those lines.
Ed?
Yeah, moving forward, I like to think of situations like this as a teachable moment. And we've learned a lot from this in terms of what could go wrong and also maybe things that we need to correct in terms of process. And I think a lot of this could relate to some of the proposed or potential proposed revisions to Chapter 20. For example, adherence to A300 standards is something that we are incorporating into Chapter 20. We've had some considerable discussion with the Public Works about the role of the Urban Forestry Commission in reviewing the removal of landmark trees. Public Works is pretty clear that they don't want to be subject to an approval process, and that's understandable, but they expressed a willingness to be subjected to a review process. I think the review of all capital projects in the city, if they impact trees, is probably appropriate, as well as the review of contractor agreements, which would reinforce adherence to A300 standards and could also have penalty clauses in there, as well as on-site arborist oversight by third parties. So, I think as we continue with our revision of Chapter 20, we could develop patches in terms of requirements as well as process that could prevent this type of thing from happening in the future. And I offer that as a solution.
Thank you, Ed. Keith?
Yeah, before we get, I know we're kind of in good conversation here, but we did remember ask Dustin to come and present on the thing, and I think we really need to think about moving on to that pretty soon here.
Right.
If you could, thanks.
So what I'm going to recommend, I'm going to take the liberty to make this recommendation, and that is to ask the enforcement working group to schedule a meeting appoint a chair and discuss what they would have a preliminary discussion on what they would want to do in terms of making changes for enforcement, not only on public land, but also private. And for the chair to liaison with the policy working group in terms of making changes to enforcement on public land, and as well to liaison with Kim Roney and determine what the working group would like to have from her in terms of support and information. Does anyone on the commission have an issue with that recommendation?
What's our current immediate to what's going on right now? We've got current things that are going on that are impacting as we speak. Are we going to just pass that on and just look back on it and go, well, we're moving as fast as we can?
Well, that'll be up to the enforcement working group to come back with some kind of recommendation or discussion for the Urban Forestry Commission. But I'd like to make sure that the commission does not have any issue with the recommendation that I just stated so that we can move on. So anybody? Kim?
I know Karen has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Karen, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. I'm on the enforcement subcommittee, but I also just wanted to say that it would really help with transparency if when Greg wrote these letters to the people in violation that it was publicly documented, the date and the nature of the violation. And that's something that I will focus on in the enforcement subcommittee.
Thank you.
And then to follow up, I think that what I'm hearing Patrick say is you would anticipate a short-term and long-term recommendation, and that the short-term could address this issue.
Well, to the extent there, or you mean with the municipal golf course?
Yeah, I'm just thinking if Karen is asking those kinds of questions, like what are the documented violations, then you would be able to make a short-term recommendation without some sort of data or metric, like we have public comments, we have pictures, are there Asheville app, are there other kinds of violation documentation so that you could make a short-term recommendation would be the kinds of questions either this work group could ask, which would take a whole another month, or could be asked now for the work group to work from.
Okay. Yes, well, those are good comments, and I'll let the enforcement working group sort that out. Who's up there? Mark?
Yes, is this a single person who is complaining to somebody in your group or something? Because I'm not receiving any messages about this newest set of violations that you're talking about. You know, and this happened at a previous tree commission meeting where nobody's telling me that they're concerned about something or other so that I can go out and look. In the meantime, I get hundreds of people who contact me routinely to tell me about something they're concerned about, whether it's a dead tree or a branch hanging over their sidewalk, or they can't see to pull out in an intersection or whatever. You know, I'm buried under those people, but I'm not hearing anything from the people that you all are hearing from. And then we have the meeting and, you know, you're upset about the situation. And, you know, what do you think of it, Mark? Well, I don't know. Nobody told me. So how about somebody telling me some of these things once in a while instead of me finding them out at the meeting?
So I know that can't remember now whether it was Jackson or Hunter, did send an email out in which had all the a link to all the emails that were submitted for the public comment section. So as a regular participant in the Urban Forestry Commission meetings, I assume you would have gotten that. If not, I will make sure that you get that the link to that to those public comment emails.
Sorry, that's not the first place I go to look when I want to find out that something pressing and urgent and happening right now, where I would go to find that sort of thing, you know. So no, I probably glazed right over looking at the public comment because I'm not used to having urgent things reported to me in that sort of format. You know, normally somebody's ringing your phone off the hook or emailing you to death or sending Asheville apps to you. You know, you don't find out about things secondhand that you need to act on quickly. So sorry, I didn't know that that was the place I should, you know, find things like this that are real barn burners.
Right. Well, if you can't find the link, let me know and I'll make sure you get it, Kim, and then we got to move on.
Yeah, I'll just say, Mark, it's certainly not just in one department. Transit, for example, folks send a variety of different concerns and some important things get missed. Mm-hmm. So I would say that if enforcement might want to hear what I'm hearing is that staff also need to be included in communications and that we may have a clog or a misconnection.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. This was a very good discussion. And I would hope that in our September meeting that we'll receive at least some update from the enforcement working group. The other issue under public comment, and I know there was at least one person, maybe two, who wanted to call in about the Hall Creek sidewalk project. And I had received some emails from people in Hall Creek regarding the project and who were very concerned that from what they stated to me was the removal of some 77 trees as part of this project. Of course, the information that I was getting was only one side. So I asked that Dustin Clemens come to our meeting and give us an update on the Hall Creek sidewalk project and explain to us about the tree removal and also the stormwater plan for that project. And Dustin, I apologize that the meeting has gone on for so long now, but it's all yours.
No apology needed. You guys have a lot on your plate. I will try to be brief though, and definitely save some time to address specific questions or specific issues you all are hearing from the community or that you might have yourself. So I'll give everyone a quick overview of what the project is and then get a little bit more into the detail.
So you might just tell the commission and members your title.
Thank you. I'm Dustin Clemens. I'm a program manager in the Capital Projects Department with the City of Asheville. The new Hall Creek sidewalk project is a city project funded in part from the 2016 transportation bond. It is also being funded by an NCDOT grant. It is part of an NCDOT road, so the funding split between bond funding and NCDOT funding is around 50-50, with approximately, very round numbers, $2 million being funded from each agency. The project is obviously along New Hall Creek Road. It extends from the south on Miller Road, which is towards the bottom of the screen, about a mile north on New Hawk Creek Road and terminates at Bell Road. The project is on a very narrow road right of way. So over the last probably 2 years, we've been working really closely with individual property owners to acquire right of way in order to build the sidewalk. We're building to both city standards and NCDOT standards. So our sidewalk width will be a 6 foot wide back of curb sidewalk. And in order to construct that, there is quite a lot of stormwater infrastructure that has to be installed, as well as retaining walls. So the sidewalk will be on the west side or the left side of this image for approximately half of the project length. And then around Dogwood Grove Road, the sidewalk will shift to the east side of the road and continue up north to the terminus on the east side of the road. As I indicated, it's a narrow right of way. There's a dire need for pedestrian improvements along this roadway. And because of that, there is quite a bit of shoulder work that has to take place within those easements that we're requiring on private property. We've tried to minimize the amount of disturbance to private property as much as possible. So we've tried to hit sort of a sweet spot in the height of some of these retaining walls. The taller the retaining wall, the much more expensive it is, but the less right of way will have to also be acquired. So we've sort of balanced the cost of the retaining walls versus the cost of the right of way as much as we could in several areas. Some of those DOT standards that you might have heard about, because we've heard about them too, are how the drainage is handled behind the retaining walls for probably about 30% of the entire length of the corridor. Our original design called for grass swales behind the retaining walls to deal with the drainage coming from private property. But going back and forth with the DOT, we were required to modify those details to include a paved swale behind the retaining walls. There are some residents in the neighborhood that feel that that's not really in keeping with the residential character of their property. And I do not disagree with that, but it is a requirement that the DOT is forcing us to use. So I know that they are working on outreach to the DOT specifically to see if some of those requirements can be modified. And we are in active conversations with the DOT to try to address that as well. The overall status right now is we've finished design work, minus a few very minor items that we're addressing for DOT. We are still working through utility coordination with both water infrastructure and Duke utility lines. We hope to get through those utility conflicts within the next couple of months. And also within the next couple of months, wrap up all of the right-of-way acquisition. Once we have all of the right-of-way acquired, we do have to go through a DOT process to get all of those acquisitions certified on their behalf, which is about a 2-month process. So we think we're probably still about 3 or 4 months away from bidding for construction on these projects, but that's very subjective to change depending on how some of these utility conflicts get addressed. So that's a really high level overview. I did not talk much about tree removal. Obviously, you guys will want to talk about that. So to address that at just a very high level, we have not done a detailed survey to count the number of trees that have been removed. So if there is a number of 77 floating out there, I do not know if that is an accurate number or not. We do have a survey, and we do have, as part of the right-of-way acquisition, we have acquired temporary construction easements for the contractor to build the retaining walls and to build the stormwater systems and to build the sidewalks associated with that infrastructure. And of course, the permanent easements that will encompass the retaining walls and stormwater and sidewalks as well. What we plan to do is when we have a contractor on board and understand what their construction sequencing and methods are going to be for the retaining walls, we'll then work with them to try to save as many trees as we possibly can within that temporary construction easement. But we do not yet know until we have conversations with the contractor and understand what their approach is going to be to building these walls, exactly how that, which tree can be preserved and which tree cannot be preserved.
So the retaining wall and the stormwater runoff system would necessitate removal of an uncertain number of trees at this point?
That is an accurate statement, yes, sir. As you can see, that these are the technical drawings the engineer has prepared. The gray area is the proposed 6-foot wide sidewalk. The heavy black line is the proposed retaining wall. And behind that retaining wall, this thicker double dashed line is the temporary construction easements and the proposed limits of disturbance. Again, just because we're showing it as the proposed limits of disturbance does not mean that every tree within that area is going to get removed. We'll work with the contractor again to determine how they're going to build these retaining walls, be it from the back, be it from the front, or be it from a combination of both the back and the front, to understand exactly what those impacts might be for those trees.
Okay. Sharon?
Yeah, a quick question. Are you going to count your trees on private property first and then look at your other? Are you going to treat it all together of just counting trees? Because I do know when MSD has done work that they will compensate the owners when they've got to go in and redo pipe or something, and they'll put a value on each tree that they have to remove to put the pipe in. Do you guys do that same type of thing, or?
We do, and the way it's done is when we're negotiating through a third-party agent with the private property owner for both the permanent easement and the temporary construction easement, there's an appraisal process that's done based on the land value and based on improvements within that land value too, so that there's an independent process to go through to put a dollar figure for both the temporary easement and the permanent easement whenever we're taking private property.
Do you have an idea of how much private property you're dealing with on this and how much is just easement for the city due to the roadway?
The only thing that we will be allowed to work on is area that we've gotten easements from. So we're required, we can't work on private property. We have to have easements in order to do that. So that the temporary construction easement is that area that allows the contractor to get in there and do the work that they have to do.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. So when you have your temporary easement, but that typically may belong to the Joneses, and they've given you that easement, and then there's trees on it that were the Joneses, but now it's a temporary easement, and that's where you'll go to negotiate with the Joneses whether trees stay or go, or they can be purchased to plant new trees after the construction is done.
There is a little bit of that opportunity for negotiation with the property owner through the appraiser based on particular assets. And we've definitely had many conversations with individual property owners on this project about value of trees, value of landscape improvements, and other things like that.
Thank you, Dustin.
Of course.
Chardin?
Thank you, Dustin, for the presentation. Just looking on Google Street View, driving down New Hawk Creek, you kind of have like a bank of green on the left, and then it looks like power lines are mostly on the east side of New Hawk Creek. Was there any discussion about putting the sidewalk on the east side?
There was a lot of an unbelievable amount of discussion on that as well. We almost had it designed to the 60% level on the east side. There were significant additional retaining walls that would have to be built on the east side, and other private property impacts that caused us to sort of shift design and end up going to the west side for that first southern section, and then shifting back over to the right side. So we've definitely explored a lot of that with our engineer and done cost safety analyses as much as we could to try to limit the number of crossings, and try to limit the overall expense for the city as well.
Instead of retaining walls and building on that steep slope on the east side, was there any discussion of just doing like a pier system and kind of having like a floating sidewalk instead of doing all the retaining wall construction?
There was not. No, we did not look at in what I would consider an innovative strategy like that, because there are, again, this is a DOT road with DOT funding, and they have very specific standards and details that they rely on for good reason. And if I'm speculating here, of course, but if we would have proposed something like that, it would not have been approved.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, thank you. So is the contractor going to prepare a separate set of construction drawings then, or are they going to be working off the plans that you just showed us?
They will be working off the plans that they just showed us. They will have, once they propose, that I did not mention, but the retaining walls are modular block retaining walls. So
Okay.
once they determine which manufacturer or brand of retaining walls, they will have to do additional shop drawings, submittals for the engineer's review, just on the technical aspects of how it's put together. But when it comes to tree impacts, that's going to be more of a field staking coordination effort between the city of Asheville's inspectors, myself, and then the contractor.
So I guess that kind of led to my next question. The trees haven't been located on the site plan at all.
Not on the set of construction drawings that we've issued to the contractor, no.
Right.
What they will do is they will stake out the temporary construction easement. They'll have a surveyor stake all of that out. And once we have that line staked, we'll meet in the field with the contractor and again, talk through their methods of construction and see which trees will have to go. And a lot of them will have to go, but there will be also some along that temporary construction line that technically the contractor would have the legal ability to remove based on the drawings. But we want to preserve as many as we possibly can. And we're committing to work with the contractor to try to preserve those whenever we can.
So this kind of speaks to the earlier problem that we had with the golf course in a way, and that's that we can't rely on contractors to even pretend to understand basic tree biology enough to make decisions as to which trees can be saved and which can't, especially if the trees aren't located on a site plan and you can't even guess what type of impact might occur without seeing the relationship of the tree and its roots to the grading that's going to occur, let alone how the grading process is going to occur, let alone any alternative design that might enable us to save trees. So I'm calling into question the process along with the statement that we're going to save as many trees as we can when there's no process being employed to save as many trees as we can.
Yeah, I hear you, Mr. Macy, and I don't disagree with you, but I'll tell you that this is a process that we have used in the past. We've used it for the French Broad River Greenway West. Again, the exact same process. We did not have a tree survey there, but we worked hand in hand with the contractor to limit the amount of tree removal. And I think that's a very successful example of exactly how we as staff can work hand in hand with the contractor and save healthy trees.
And do you have empirical information as to how well those trees performed after they were construction damaged in the past?
We do not have empirical data for that, no, sir.
Right.
The alternative.
I don't intend to put you on the spot, but just to bring attention to the rest of the commission that I personally don't trust contractors with trees. Most tree experts spend 4, 6, 8 years studying tree biology and understand some techniques that truly enable you to save trees, or as many trees as you can in construction processes. And that's not being employed in these cases in future. And I have to say this so that we can keep a straight face with the public, because they're the ones that we have to be transparent with. So I'll be quiet.
Dustin, if you'll humor me for a second, jump back in. I can't help but think about how many less trees would be removed if the sidewalk was built on piers on the east side of the road and underneath the power lines that already don't have any trees underneath them. Is there a way that you could at least ask the DOT to consider that?
We certainly could ask them, but I will also reiterate that we have gone through a years-long design process. We have a final design in hand. We have funding in place, and we're finalizing right-of-way acquisition for the current design. If we were to go through a process of changing the alignment, it would mean that we acquired property that we didn't need to acquire, and we would have to acquire additional property on the other side of the road to do additional design work, and it would be easily years of delay. I can say with confidence that there would be less trees removed had we put the sidewalk on the east side of the road for the entire stretch. But I can also say with confidence that the cost would be astronomically higher than what it is right now. And there needs to be a balance, I think, between the way public money is spent, period. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of work and it's in the final stages, but there's a lot of dump trucks going up and down Big Hall Creek with a bunch of dirt to build retaining walls that wouldn't necessarily need to be burning that diesel fuel to do that. So I'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
Cecil?
I would just observe that it seems like on a project like this, there ought to be some mechanism for the Urban Forestry Commission to be consulted earlier. Not that we would have successfully changed it, and I get Dustin's argument about the cost. I mean, that's certainly a big issue. But somehow it seems like we're hearing about this after a year or years of project development, and now we're told about it. And it's sort of like, basically there's nothing we can do. It looks to me like no input from us that's going to change the plan. So why were we consulted? Yeah, that's it.
Well, I think we need to keep in mind that our main role is that to advise the city council. You know, other than alternative compliance, I don't know that there's a requirement that we be consulted on much of anything else other than that we may request. So you know, as far as capital projects are concerned, I don't think there's an automatic requirement that we enter into that discussion. You know, to do that would require obviously an ordinance change. So the best we could do is, whether it's the municipal golf course or this sidewalk project, is to evaluate these as lessons learned and see if there is a way that we can make recommendations to the city council for some kind of change.
And I'll add, you know, I'm happy to come to this commission to provide updates on any capital projects you guys have any interest in. And we are certainly open to suggestions. And I realize it's hard for you all to take me seriously at this point of the project, but we have explored lots of different options on design, especially on this particular project. And we've weighed a lot of pros and cons, and I feel confident that had we brought you all along through that process, we would be at the same point we are today. There are just lots of technical reasons. An elevated sidewalk works great, but how do you handle the stormwater that's associated with the new curb for that elevated sidewalk? You have to build an elevated stormwater system below it as well. And that's just fraught with technical issues. So again, I don't want anybody on this committee to feel like you don't have input. We are happy to share project status, project updates, and we're happy to hear feedback from this group and from the neighborhood, which we do on a very regular basis.
Thank you. Chardin?
Yeah, just last, thank you for bringing that up, Cecil. It is, I think, especially from the golf course, it seems like things were kind of already decided by the time, you know, Urban Forestry Commission was consulted. And just here to point out that there'd be less stormwater if there were more trees left standing. So, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments for Dustin? If not, thank you very much, Dustin, for coming to the meeting and explaining the project. And maybe we'll have you back for a further update later on.
I'd be happy to. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on to finally old business. Is there any update from the budget working group? None? Okay. Policy working group, Ed Macy.
Yeah, thank you. The policy working group held a couple of meetings, one with Chris Collins regarding chapter 719. And we're pretty close to closing the book on our work with revising that chapter. That's the canopy amendment. Probably the most significant contribution is inclusion of landmark tree language, which would give developers and builders double credit for protecting landmark trees, and also require double canopy replacement for removing them. So it seems like we've got the city's agreement to include that language. The one area where we're hung up with, and Chris Collins is checking with legal on, is a provision that would require or address boundary tree issues. A boundary tree issue is where a builder or developer is building on their site and they're impacting a neighbor's tree that's on just across the property line. Because tree roots don't really recognize property boundaries, and there's been some impacts to neighbors' trees over the recent years. The most recent notable one is the large sycamore tree that's behind Gray Eagle. It's being impacted pretty severely by the construction project on the adjacent site. So the whole intent with this is to have some language in there that, number one, recognizes that boundary trees will be impacted, and number two, requires developers to enter into boundary tree agreements with the neighbors so that the developer recognizes they're impacting a neighbor's tree, agreeing to either mitigate those impacts with arboricultural treatments or remove and replace the tree if it should die within a couple growing seasons of that impact. So that sycamore tree behind Gray Eagle could probably cost upwards of $7,000 to $10,000 to remove. And it's unfortunate that the property owner has to pay that expense because the developer built next door. So the whole intent of this boundary tree agreement is to protect our neighbors. Update on Chapter 20. We're moving along well with that. We had a meeting with Public Works. We are also including some landmark tree provisions in that chapter. There aren't any major hangups. I think that's going to preclude any future revisions. We're just working out some detail and language and process and things like that. After some of today's discussion, though, I may want to circle back and think about how public projects affect public trees and how we might process that differently. So if any of you have any thoughts on that, feel free to shoot me a note. I appreciate that. For the sake of brevity, Patrick, I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any questions for Ed? Yes, Sharon.
Hey, Ed, that's great on boundary trees. It needs to get into 711.3 as well somehow, some way. So we're talking to Chris about 719. It'd be a small text amendment to get it into 711.3 because that's where a lot of, I look at plans that I don't see what the trees are that are butted up against a plan. And I know there's a lot of them when I Google Earth it and see.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent point. And I also liked your boundary tree removal or impact. I thought that was great. It was brief, to the point, and excellent. So thank you for that work as well.
We're copying what other cities have done across the country, so it's not.
I figured, but we're so late to the game. It's just amazing. But it'd be great to look at TRC and see when they have the limits of disturbance, how much we're disturbing the neighbors' properties.
Right.
You know, because we don't see it. So thank you for that.
Sure. Hey, send me some examples of 711.3 where it might apply, so I can think about that a little bit.
I'll send you an email on and we'll discuss it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
That's all, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Moving on to the Urban Forest Master Plan Working Group. Is there any update?
None at this time. I will try to set up a meeting within the next couple of weeks so that we can move forward, and also contact the Knoxville tree people about visiting them about their process.
Okay, thank you. Ed?
Yeah, I would like to encourage Zoe to invite Keith to our future meetings.
Yeah.
Since Keith is having some discussions within the city about moving forward on the plan as well. It's better if we're just all on the same team.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you, Zoe. Stay there because missing middle housing update. Zoe?
I think that everybody's aware of what the missing middle housing study is. when we last met, they had had a stakeholder meeting that didn't include the Urban Forestry Commission. And in the overview that they presented to the stakeholders, they specifically identified as possible barriers other UDO development requirements, such as the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance, Section 7-19, landscaping standards, Section 7-11.3, and steep slope requirements, Section 7-12.4. So the policy working group worked together to send a statement to the analysis group, essentially saying that we were not okay with the consideration of any of those as possible barriers. The actual advisory committee met on Thursday, and I have to say that there was no mention of any of the ordinances in any of the materials that they presented as possible barriers. And I read the analysis, the larger analysis yesterday, and that's true of that larger analysis. So moving forward, when I present my feedback on the larger analysis, I will probably add this back in just in case. But Patrick, what is your impression?
So I think you're right. I was surprised that the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance was not mentioned as a potential barrier. And we'll get to the GIS study related to that in a few minutes. There was some discussion, some option put out there that the landscape barrier standards might be changed to fit the different kinds of missing middle housing, but that is not a recommendation. It was just mentioned in the analysis and barriers memo. So we still have a ways to go, and the advisory committee will, in the next 2 weeks, will be putting in their input to the additional input to the analysis and barriers memo. And of course, this Friday from 4 to 7 at the Cherokee Center, there is a citywide public engagement workshop, which is an opportunity for everybody outside of the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee to come and review some of the materials that the consultant Opticos has prepared and give further input and feedback to the consultant. So Ed, I saw your hand was up. Do you still want to say something?
I don't believe my hand's up. I think Mark had his hand up.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
my hand's up. I know it's out of order on the agenda.
That's all right.
I wanted to share an update I got back from Chris. I sent an email to him and to Greg and to Eric in legal to share your concerns and your desire to, pursue, stop work orders or notices of violation or that sort of thing. The quote grading work, this is Chris's reply, noted is a water department project replacing a water line along Fairway Drive. Is that what the complainant is concerned about on Fairway Drive, or is it some other location? Do you know?
I am not sure, to be honest.
All righty. So, not knowing what she's actually complaining about will sort of get in the way of determining whether or not there's some sort of violation going on. But and that's why it would really be beneficial if citizens who are concerned about damage being done to trees could be directed to report that to city staff as quickly as possible, rather than the information funneling through the the commission and then sort of eventually reaching us after you're all really upset, and she's good and upset, that would be a wonderful process change. So they are, there's no other grading going on there or near trees, according to his reply. Been reshaping some of the sections. Let's see, sand traps and some greens have been rebuilt, but not beside trees. So I'll gather more information, but if the information you have can be shared with me, because I can't find it in my emails,
Okay.
that would be really helpful.
I will do that, Mark. Thank you. And I believe the person, Gloria Shen, was primarily communicating with Chris Coral.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, well,
but
as you said, he's not a tree guy. So
yes,
if you let the tree guy know, that can be really helpful too.
I'll make sure after this meeting that you get the information, the email that was submitted for the public comment section.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Videla?
Thanks, Patrick. I was just going to follow up on the missing middle housing discussion, just to let you know that the barriers, if you attend on Friday, you'll note that one of the concerns heard that's stated publicly is this concern of loss of trees and tree impacts. So at this point, all the consultants have done is listen to various stakeholders to build up what they've begun to put together in a draft document that lists barriers and related concerns. They haven't made any recommendations yet. So that's pending. If you participate on Friday, some of your ideas may move forward if they haven't already been captured. So feel free to do that, even just to learn more about there's some really nice visuals that they put together. So it'll give you an opportunity to kind of see it all in one place and to speak with staff or the consultants. But really, I think the recommendations aren't going to be seen until about a month from now, and then we'll go from there.
Right. Thank you, Videla. And I do encourage everyone, if they can, to at least stop in during a portion of that public workshop on Friday. And if you need any further information, email me and I'll make sure, or Zoe, and we'll make sure that you get that information on the workshop. Because of the potential for the tree canopy preservation ordinance to be identified as a barrier and to help both the Missing Middle Housing Advisory Committee as well as the Urban Forestry Commission decide what the impact of that would be. I asked Chris Collins if the city staff could do a GIS survey of all the available residential single-family zoned properties in the city and all of the residential multifamily zoned vacant properties in the city, and then map the tree canopy that is on those parcels. So I'm going to ask Sam Starbaum, who did that GIS study, to go over it with the commission, just in case. It will help us, I think, in terms of taking this information and having it in our hip pockets, and just in case that the tree canopy preservation ordinance may come back around in these discussions on missing middle housing as a potential barrier. Excuse me. So, Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for those who are watching at home, my name is Sam Starbaum. I'm a planner 2 with the City of Asheville in the Planning and Urban Design Department. As Patrick had accurately surmised, what I was tasked with was this. Chris approached me and asked this broad question: given our available data, what is the tree canopy coverage in Asheville relative to residential single family and residential multifamily districts? I will try and keep this short as best as possible. Just as a quick refresh for everyone watching, there are several RS and RM districts. Those were lumped in together. This was not done as individual districts. So there wasn't an analysis for RS2, RS4, RM6, RM16, things like that. That is something that can be done later if that's something y'all want. So let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see how this went. Get rid of that. So you should be able to see the outline of the city of Asheville. City of Asheville itself is 45 square miles. In previous studies done by the Davis Group in 2018, they had done analysis of tree canopy for all of this. I think while well-intentioned, that is not necessarily accurate. I think we should be looking at what is parcelized. So what I then did is removed all elements within City of Asheville jurisdiction that aren't parcelized. This would include, but is not limited to, French Broad River, Swananoa River, I-40, 240, things like this. Because if you're having the tree conversation, that is not, I don't want to say it's disingenuous, but it's not right to say that, there's an absence of trees there and that is a problem. Of course, there aren't trees on I-40. If we're having trees there, that's going to be a larger issue than, say, tree canopy or heat island. So quickly, what we did is we looked at all RS and RM zones. You can see RM zones orange, RS zones in the yellow. We had the tree canopy information provided. The biggest challenge of this is tree canopy data from 2018. I did not have access to updated information, but we did have up-to-date information for building values, which let us determine that what parcels were vacant and were. So when you set the building value to 0, which is to say that the assessor recognizes there aren't any buildings whatsoever, that's how we determined what was vacant. So we go ahead and we see basically that there are very few parcels in Asheville. And what's nice about this is you can sort of see the outline where this is and where some of the larger parcels are that are still considered vacant. And then we apply tree canopy to it. So those are the ones that have tree canopy on them as recognized by the information provided in 2018. And we run some quick analysis with that. So ultimately, this is what we come up with. Can you all see this results table right now? Yes, cool. So, with this, there's some information we found. What we were able to determine is that overall tree canopy coverage for City of Asheville in the parcelized components only, and again, that's 38 square miles versus the 45 square miles, there's 53% overall tree canopy coverage, which is fine. And then you can look at these totals. So there's 13,000 acres of RS district land. There's 6,895 acres of RM total land. You get your tree canopy there. You then again set the building value to 0, and suddenly the RS and RM totals get much smaller. So you can move into what's vacant, and you can see the results here. So for tree canopy percentage of vacant RS parcels, they're still nearly 50. That's 49.21% tree canopy for vacant RS parcels. And again, that's for all RS. That's not separated by RS2, 4, or 8. For RM vacancy, that's a little bit lower at 44.68%. And then I just did the converse. So I then said, if we have vacant, what is built? What do we have for tree canopy on existing infrastructure where building value is greater than 0 or greater than 1? And we find that there's still adequate canopy specifically for RS. This is one of those, if you were to break it up spatially, you would find that this is largely in North Asheville, Northeast Asheville, largely where you would expect for cultural and geographic areas. It is much lower for the tree canopy percentage in RM parcels that already are built upon, that goes down to 35%. And then you just get your overall. So when you combine those, when you do the math and you say, what is the total tree canopy percentage for all RS and all RM zones, you get about 50% again for RS, and then it is much lower for overall RM. So that's a little bit about that study. I was not privy to any conversations. I was just asked to sort of do this by Chris. So instead of me talking about things that you may or may not be interested in, I would think it would be a better use, more efficient use of our time if I just stand for questions. I will say this, though, there are a few things to take note of. Again, that the tree canopy is from 2018. All other data is up to date. The parcels, everything is pulled straight from emergency data from Buncombe County. What isn't there is what has been granted entitlements but hasn't been built yet. My colleague Clay Mitchell, who's an excellent planner with all of us in planning and urban design, has done some back of the napkin calculations and has figured that there's about 1,500 residential units that have entitlements. They have gone through PZC, they have gone from TRC, they have gone before council. So whether it's a level 1, level 2, level 3, doesn't discriminate, but there's about 1,500 units that haven't been built. And when I was doing this research, I had noticed some of these larger parcels, Pinecroft, 77 Hansel, things like this. Those will be impacted, but aren't represented in this study. So while this is good data, while this is useful, as Patrick has said, it is, I must stress with professional integrity that this is a snapshot and that this should be monitored almost continuously, whether that's quarterly, whether that's annually. It's really, once you get all the right pieces in place, it's a very easy analysis to perform. But we got to make sure we're up with data, we're up with building trends, and we're up with assessors information as well. So that's what I have. Thank you everyone for that. And that's a lot of information and not a lot of time. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Sam. Does anybody have any questions or comments on Sam's presentation?
Is the data posted, Sam? That was too much for me to comprehend. So.
It is not. What I can do is I can send you the spreadsheet, and if you want, I can also I can zip the project file for GIS and send that to you.
Or to all of us and post it, or I mean. The only way I can look at this is when I asked for what our total percentage on a site is being removed and what we are saving, so that I can get a real-time picture of what's going on right now. But that's not always in the RS and RM, you know. And then we've got the lovely CZ issue, you know, that throws everything data-wise.
Yeah.
But thank you for doing all that. If I could understand it, I'm sure I could use it somewhere.
Yeah, and I did just go ahead and post that specific spreadsheet in the chat. We can find a way to make sure that this is also publicly available and hosted in the right place. Again, I was not totally sure on the context. This is just information Chris had asked for, and then I was asked to speak. So yes, we can get that. That is, and yes, you have hinted at the larger challenges. How, you know, this is what's available, what's being taken out through this process is hard. And again, that's only captured if you have a longitudinal study and not just this snapshot, because I can't tell you what's come out for all these other construction projects.
Yeah, thank you.
Zoe?
Yes, and this may express my ignorance. I thank you for doing the study. In some of the analysis I've seen put out by other people, there's a statement that the combined tree canopy on RS and RM zone vacant lots adds up to about 54% or over half of Asheville's total tree canopy. I don't see how that follows from your analysis.
I can't speak to that. You know, this happens.
I don't think it does. So.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, I would, you know, everyone cites a data study, and it's not to say that they're wrong or that it's just, it's done differently, right? So that's like math class, how you do your work matters just as much, if not more, than the end result. anytime
Yeah.
you're doing any sort of geospatial analysis. So I can't speak to that without seeing any sort of methodology.
Right. And I don't think that was your methodology was used to get that third statement from what you got about tree canopy currently covers 49.21% average in the vacant lots. That's what I understand your analysis to say. So that statement that follows is a little bit, I'm not going to say incendiary, but I don't think it's truthful. And I think we need to avoid having that go out.
So you're talking about when you say 54%, can you say more? Can you say where you're getting this from?
It was from an email sent by somebody else. Yeah. And I just question, passing that along to the public is what I would question, because that did not come from you.
So to be clear, I don't know that you can compare adequately the data that Sam has put together with the data from the Davy Resource Group. And as Sam suggested, he didn't have the benefit of knowing what methodology that the Davy Resource Group used in their tree canopy study. So he couldn't compare what he did to what they did to see if there were any abnormalities involved there. Is that accurate, Sam?
Yes, and I will go one further and I'll say that I do know that the Davies Group did include everything within Asheville's jurisdiction, which again includes rivers, that includes federal interstates, state highways, things like that, where that's not parcelized and that's not. So I mean, immediately it's not comparing apples to apples because I'm working with almost 8 square miles less for that overall calculation. And anytime you change the denominator, those numbers are going to look different. And again, that's not to say that they're wrong. There's different ways to view this. Many things can be true at once. It's just that's not particularly useful if you're not going to be putting trees there or you're not concerned about trees going out of there.
Ed?
Yeah, I think Sam just answered the question. Davy Resource Group did use rivers and open bodies of water and things like that in their calculus. They use NAPE imagery too, and I don't know what the source of your data is from. But even when you're comparing, satellite versus NAPE, it's apples and oranges. So it's what you get, different sources, different data.
Yeah, and this, they're, in my experience as someone who has taught statistics for planners at the University of Colorado, who is well-versed in data methodology, I will say this, if this underscores anything, it is not necessarily about the tree canopy itself. It's that to make sure that we have adequate resources to track and monitor these things. Because there's, I don't want to use skin of the cat. There are many ways to go about this, but the important thing is that we have all the tools available at our hands to be able to do it however we need to. And this was very limited. Again, we were frankly lucky to be able to use all the information only because I have access to some of the emergency response servers and data from Montgomery County. I'm sure if this is done on publicly available data, that looks different. So there's aerial shoots, doing it in winter, doing it in spring, finding canopy. This is much to everyone's dismay. I could spend a lot of public money on just GIS resources just for this. And that's not to say we should get everything on the wish list, but it's worth considering.
Okay, any other questions or comments on Sam's report? Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you. Chairman.
Moving on to legislative update. This is just for, I think, information. Tomorrow at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the commission members are going to take up a proposal before them that's being pushed by, if I pronounce his name wrong, Barry Bialik, who I believe is a former chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee and the owner of Compact Housing. And he is pushing two changes to the ordinance. One relates to flag lots, which I don't think is going to impact us or the tree canopy necessarily, because it would, I think, allow for more opportunities for single family construction. And of course, the tree canopy preservation ordinance by state law does not apply to single family construction. However, the other proposal that is before the Planning and Zoning Commission has to do with changes in the cottage cluster regulations. And here, the proposal is to reduce the minimum number of individual cottage units from 5 to 2. And the question here is, would the tree canopy preservation ordinance apply to the zoning areas that provide cottage clusters? Because it is more than 2 dwelling units, or would this change mean then that the whatever is built on in cottage cluster zones, for example, duplexes, would not affect the tree canopy preservation ordinance? So Vidila, if you're still on there, can you address that specific issue?
Yeah, I'll speak to both of these really quickly. I dropped in the chat a link to the staff report on the request for these amendments. I'll say that staff is concerned about both of them. We've basically prepared a report that requests the continuance of that the issues be continued until at least after the missing middle housing study has been completed and that the public has had a chance to review the recommendations, and then to even review and consider any possible impacts to UDO changes. If the applicant wants to go to City Council, we will be requesting that P&Z deny this this request. It's a relatively minor, sorry, I turned that on the mute for a second, relatively minor adjustments to the text that have significant impacts to the city. They're suggesting to reduce the flag lot minimum width from 20 feet to 5 feet, which would effectively undermine a significant part of our subdivision ordinance, making much more land developable in a disorganized pattern. And it's promoting single family development, whereas at this time we're in the middle of a missing middle housing study, and we're trying to look at possible other types of housing units to promote so that we get are able to create regulations that provide different types of housing that have different price points, right? Single family housing is typically more expensive just because there are fewer. If you have one unit versus a triplex and you have 3 units in the same property, those units cover more ground and tend to be less expensive. So as far as the cottage developments, a key change that is being recommended is, and this, tell me if this is too much information, I can be quiet. They're recommending reducing the minimum number of cottages. Currently, the idea is having a cottage cluster with 5 to 12 units or 5 to 15 units. They're suggesting the minimum be reduced to 2. And what that does is effectively allows for 2 units in RS districts. So effectively, it's kind of a backdoor way of allowing multiple units in RS8 zones, which permit cottage developments. So I'll be presenting on this and making the case for why we think we should not be moving these amendments forward. It is certainly being couched as a way to provide more housing when there's a need, and there is a need for housing. We do not deny that. That's why we are spending $115,000 of your money to really understand what we should do and how we should move forward. But I think it's important that we do it within the community context, the community process, where the community is engaged in an understanding of what those impacts will be, rather than with no public input and with changes that are somewhat uncertain. Some are clearly negative, but there are many uncertain possible outcomes that would result from the proposed changes.
So I think the question or the issue for us is, does the tree canopy preservation ordinance apply to cottage cluster development? And if so, if this requested change were to go through, would that mean that the tree canopy preservation ordinance would not apply to cottage clusters or to any development in a cottage cluster zone of 2 units or less?
Well, let me say one other thing, Patrick, because that's not quite accurate. In the proposal to minimize flag lots to 5 feet wide, it effectively makes any large property much easier to carve up with tiny flag lots to develop without having to go through a subdivision ordinance, which requires street trees and landscaping. So it has very broad and wide-ranging possible impacts to trees and landscaping that I think we don't even really realize, because we haven't fully been able to do a lot of analysis, partially because we've been pushing that we think the timing isn't right. We're in the middle of this missing middle housing study, and we need to complete that before pushing through something that doesn't make sense to spend a lot of staff time on right now.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes.
Would that be considered a residential subdivision then, if it's an RS8?
So I believe you're talking about the cottage development. So
yeah,
because the cottage development standard is permitted in RS8 as well as in all the multifamily districts, and it has other language. You know, the intent of a cottage cluster is small cottages shared around a open space, a green space. If you reduce the number to 2 cottages, effectively, you know, the space between the 2 homes can be considered your green space. So really what it's doing, what it would do, you would still have to comply with the cottage ordinance, but it would be very easy to do. And effectively, it allows you to have a front house and a back house in RS8 that you can't do today. Today in RS8, you can have an ADU in the back, but it's subordinate, it's smaller. And so that fits into the scale of the neighborhood. And that's what we're going to argue. Whereas if this change goes through, you could have 2 similar sized homes. The cottage development actually still limits the home to 1,400 square feet, but you would be able to have that in the backyard as well.
Right. And the reason I asked is that 719 basically says residential subdivision or commercial development. So that's why I was asking why that would affect us in 719. But I do know from sitting on TRC that there's a whole lot of stuff that comes our way that doesn't fall in to a particular ordinance that 719 will apply to. So that's why I was trying to figure out why this cottage development would be impacted with residential subdivision.
With the tree canopy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say depending on the square footage, but you know,
if it's, yeah, that's right. I'd have to look back at the tree canopy preservation to see what the real triggers are. It says, I'm looking at it now, shall apply to multifamily residential and non-residential.
Right.
It says any major or minor subdivision of land should comply with the tree canopy preservation. So, yeah, I think it would apply. It would be impacted.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Vidila.
Any other questions or comments for Vidila? So since the P&Z meeting is tomorrow, there's not much time to react to this. However, if the applicant decides to pursue this to the city council, I will bring this back to the commission to see if it wants to weigh in on this proposal if it does go for city council. Okay, well, we're almost done. Also under old business, just to remind you, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Patrick. I have a 4 o'clock meeting that I'm gonna have to jump off for, so I will have to leave the meeting early.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you all in September.
See you. Just to remind you that we have a vacancy on the Urban Forestry Commission. That's Amy Smith's seat. The application deadline is August the 24th. After that, Zoe and I will be getting the applications and we will review them and then make a recommendation to the council's boards and commissions committee. And I believe the city council will take up these recommendations in October. So if you know of anybody who wants to file an application for the vacancy, they have 23 days left in which to do so.
Patrick, will you discuss your recommendations with us as a group?
Well, we can. Obviously, in the past, there's been sort of a haphazard process.
Right, that's why I'm asking, because I've been involved where we've had full disclosure and discussion, and where we've had just the chair and the vice chair make the decision and there was no discussion. So
well, in the past, actually, the commission has actually voted on a person to recommend, and then it was the chair and the vice chair brought back a recommendation to the commission to discuss, and then it was just the chair and the vice chair making a recommendation directly to the boards and commissions committee.
Right.
I'm happy to follow any kind of procedure that the commission would like. So we have an established procedure for every vacancy going forward.
I think that's a good idea.
So what's the commission's preference?
Well, you know me, I like to talk about everything all the time, ad nauseum.
Well, I'd like to have some direction. So, yeah, Zoe?
I would be more comfortable if everyone had a say in it.
Okay. Then I'll take it. Yeah, Ed?
Yeah, sorry. It might be best if maybe you all bring the commission the top 2 or 3 choices, and then we have a discussion around that rather than review everything.
It's a good idea.
Or bring a recommendation to the commission and then we go from there rather than impact everybody.
Okay. Zoe, are you okay with that?
Yeah, how many are we talking about?
Well, I have no idea because the application deadline isn't over yet. So then Zoe and I will evaluate the applicants. And if there are several that we think are just top notch, we'll bring those back to the commission and along with their application and resume, and we can have a discussion and perhaps make a recommendation. If there's a person that is just way above someone else, we might just bring that person back. But either way, we will circle back to the commission for some kind of discussion and input.
Can I suggest that we have like 3 people, whether they're way up there and or not so qualified, that we at least review 3 or 2 so that we get some kind of feel about who our applicants are.
Okay.
That's okay. You know, a little bit more, I don't know, a little more choices to discuss. I mean, I agree with Ed. Sometimes we get 9 applicants, you know, and some of the applicants reapply from the past. So, yeah, I agree that waiting through 9 is too much, but I think 3 maybe, or I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
All right. Well, Zoe and I will make that determination, and we'll at least bring back 2 or 3 people. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Does anyone have any other old business? Yes. Cecil?
Yeah. I think this is a question more or less for Greenworks, but I heard last week that a team of volunteers working with, I think, NOAA, were driving around Asheville with sensors to determine hotspots around town. And I wondered how that, temperature hotspots, and I wondered how that might dovetail with the work we engaged in with NOAA and I think NASA a couple of years ago to find the places in town that were heat islands. I wonder if there's any coordination there.
Yeah, I noticed that Sarah's still with us, so I might ask her to speak to this, but there's an article in today's paper about the heat mapping that Greenworks is doing, and they are doing it under the auspices of NOAA. It's a little bit different. They're doing street level analysis, whereas the heat island analysis that was done 4 years ago with the NASA developed team was really more taken from existing data. That was probably satellite-based data. So this is real ground level stuff that they're doing right now, and it should be a pretty interesting analysis once they're done. Sarah, do you have anything to add? Did I speak correctly?
You did. We actually finally got the go ahead last Monday. So we completed all 3. We had a morning, afternoon, and evening shift where we rode around in pairs. One person drove, one person navigated, and we had the sensor. And it took the data at the street level of, I think it was 9 different routes, 3 times that day. And we submitted all the data and we got the approval that we didn't have to redo anything. So that's good. It kept getting prolonged and rescheduled because the weather has to be like perfect. all these parameters that have to fall into place. But we did it last Monday and the data's in. So woohoo!
It seems to me that the reason I ask is it seems to me that we're real clear that trees affect street level heat. And it seems like that information is something that would feed into the master plan, for instance, our prospective urban master plan. Where do we need more trees?
Right. Yep. We plan on, when we get the data analyzed, when we get all the results back, that's really going to focus and steer our planning and our planting going forward.
Thanks.
Sarah, do you have any other update from Asheville Greenworks?
Well, as going back to the municipal golf course, the proposal's in, and we have another site visit on the 9th. So that looks like it's going forward according to plan. So
That has to do with the planting of trees in the community.
yeah, the nursery extension. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna go back out for a second site visit and start to get an idea of the irrigation layout, how many trees the first year, and going forward what we're gonna do. So that proposal's in. So we should hear back pretty soon on it. So.
Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. All right. Well, you all get a gold star for endurance. This has been a long meeting, but I appreciate all of you hanging in there, and I hope that you feel that it was at least a very productive meeting in terms of information and exchanging of ideas. So if there's no other or anybody who objects, then I will call this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting is September 5th. So,
Adios.
all right. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Take care, everybody.